You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Life is not easy. It never was, and it never will be. A good life takes grit. Prioritize who you are and who you want to be, because life isn't fair, and a little grit can make all the difference. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call. I am joined by my brother, the Gritty Broman. Brent, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you.
All right. Today's podcast is with our friend, Dr. Hillary Lampers.
Doctor.
And we ambushed her at the Western Hunt Expo as well. And this podcast was never supposed to be. She and I were going to talk about testosterone and HRT, and we ended up going on a strong tangent, which is what podcasts are for, on CBD oil. It's the positive
effects
of it, and you know why it matters, and so I think that it's an interesting show.
I learned lots of things in there.
She did a podcast on their Hunt Harvest Health podcast, their platform, talking about cannabis, the most vilified plant, and why. And it's a great show. It really goes into some depth on how CBD oil is healthy for us and does a lot for us, and how it's been sort of vilified because of mostly political issues. So it's a good podcast. And I know Hillary mentioned she was coming out with some products around this, and so we'll keep you updated on that. But if you have not been to the Hunt Harvest Health webpage and you're into eating healthy, living well, and living a healthy life, and what better thing is there than our physical health? You need to go check it out. It's huntharvesthealth.com, all one word. And there's recipes, there's stories, there's programs that they offer. But I mean, man,
I signed up for the testosterone project.
I mean, these recipes, you got pressure cooked wild turkey, venison stuffed spaghetti, squash, avocado breakfast bowls. You've got blueberry backstrap, jalapeno rabbit poppers. Low carb pumpkin cream cheese muffins. Let's see.
Find me the healthy cookie. Find me a healthy cookie, Brian.
I don't know if that's on here.
I don't think it really
Sorry,
exists.
brother.
It's a unicorn, but I'm on the look.
Roasted dandelion root tea.
Ooh.
Seared elk. Aloe spritzer. Refreshing aloe spritzer. Broccoli leek soup. I mean, the list goes on, folks. It's there's just some delicious stuff. Stealthy dehydrated meals. There's a whole section on that, which we just covered in Tuesday's podcast this week.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, there's a lot of very useful and beneficial things on the page. You go to the programs, and they have the Testosterone Project, ways to naturally boost and improve your testosterone levels. That's an excellent. It's an excellent resource. They also have awesome stuff if you're going to shop Amazon, which we should do some point. We're just lazy. But on this page, you'll see the different items that they recommend, like Mylar bags, food processors, things that jars, things you buy off of Amazon, right? That if you buy through them supports their show. So check out their page. You really should. It's a great resource, and I love Hillary and Ryan and what they do for humanity, for hunting. And it's huntharvesthealth.com. And without further ado, we're going to jump into the show. Hope you enjoy the show. Leave us a review on iTunes if you haven't already. If you have, we appreciate it. And sign up for our newsletter at briancall.com. We're going to do new giveaways through the newsletter, so be ready and watching for that. And as always, we greatly appreciate you, and stay gritty, friends. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast.
Yeah.
I am at the Hunt Expo. I am your host, Brian Call, and I am here with my good friend, Dr. Hillary Lampers. What else? Hunt Harvest Health podcast.
I am just the roundabout
Wife of the
busiest
famous
woman. First
Stealthy
of all,
Hunter.
let me say for all the man crushes out there, yes, I am married to your man crush, Stealthy Hunter.
Yeah,
I don't see
you
him very
just
often because he is out in the mountains communing with animals
You just
all the time.
completely embarrassed him.
Okay, let me tell you a funny story. I work in a new clinic in Bozeman, Montana. We just moved there. I joined a clinic there. And so I get now a larger population of podcast listeners because we have a lot of listeners in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, etc. So people in these areas will drive because they maybe don't have good access to a healthcare provider. So they'll drive because they heard me on the podcast. They trust me. So they come and see me. And all of a sudden I see a lot of men now. And I'm not even kidding you. I can count 3 for sure, maybe 4, where guys are like at the end of their appointment and during their appointment, they pull their phone out and they're like, so can I show you some pictures of my elk? And I'm like, sure. And now granted, these are all awesome guys and I'm glad they come to me as patients and I'm trying not to divulge any secret things here. But I've had a handful of them at the end of their treatment literally say to me, so you know I have a man crush on your husband, right? And I'm like,
So these are confirmed.
Join the club.
No,
so I have every single right to say that people have a crush. I make the joke now that 20 years ago, the guys would have been crushing on me, and now they're all crushing on my husband.
Well, Ryan is
which 20 years ago, he would have been totally appalled and embarrassed and hiding in the closet from.
Yeah.
And now he's like, all right, whatever. He's getting better with it. But
I think that's what's so appealing about Ryan, too, is he's just going to do his thing and be who he is and authentic, and he is unique. There's not very many people.
And he's stubborn as a mule, and I'm stubborner than he is, so I can deal with it.
You'd have to be. How long have you been married now?
22 years in June.
That's Susanna and I, too.
I know. We've been together 24, married 22. So long enough for me to basically, we have a fight. He'll say, I don't like the way you're talking to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? This is how I talk. You don't know that now by 22 years? It's like, we know each other's thing. But, for good reason, he's had this success. And I full-heartedly believe he deserves it. But I also do a lot of work to make sure that he keeps that. And I also, our mission with Hunt Harvest Health is really to just provide information to this community and to a population and to populations outside of this community to bring hunting in, to bring this lifestyle to them.
Yeah.
We've done a really good job of doing that. I have guests on my podcast who probably years ago would have never agreed to be on a hunting podcast or talk about this. And we now have people coming to us saying, guys that are health gurus in the healthosphere, people that are super smart people, and they're realizing, like, I want to learn how to hunt. Like, I'm talking about this. I should probably be doing it. So that is a cool thing that we really wanted to blend and show people, like, the whole stereotypes that we conjure up about certain people is that nobody's ever one certain thing. Like, we love to garden. We love healthy food. I mean, Ryan look at him. He's a total hippie. Like, I tell him every day to shave the beard and cut his hair. And people think it's because he blames it on me. My wife was a hippie. And I'm like, what? No. But I did come in with health things. I grew up in a very different environment than he did. I mean, I grew up in a liberal environment. I grew up in a Native American environment. I grew up going to sundances and sleeping in teepees and having a sweat lodge in my backyard. And my birth father was a pastor. So I've had a lot of experience to different lifestyles and different things. Ryan grew up in a very conservative household where they hunted and fished and they worked hard. And that was their, that was what they did. And so he got, he had a totally different upbringing than me.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to say is people can come together, work on their differences. And the truth is we all have a lot of things in common.
Yeah, for sure.
He has come to love plants more than I do.
Yeah.
He loves healthy food. He loves gardening. He loves getting his hands in dirt. He educates himself about it. And I used to be like that, and he's taken on more of that aspect as I've gotten into doctoring and into clinical. I don't have time for all of that per se. And now I'm a mom, it changes things too.
Well, so. I want to get into a few things. Like on today's show, I want to talk about, we've had behind the scenes discussions about health, testosterone, hormones, how we're feeling physically. I want to get into some of that today and see where you're at. We talked a couple years back. It's been a couple years now.
I know.
About
been 2 years.
Sex, testosterone, and gut health.
And we didn't even scratch the surface on that. And that podcast launched Ryan and I. I can't even. I still get emails. I saw your Gritty podcast.
One of our most downloaded podcasts to date. Still,
really.
Yeah.
And I'm like, people are still watching that.
Stays in top 3 continually since you guys did it.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's good to know.
If you're watching or listening, that's my brother Brent, the Gritty Broman.
Hi.
Brent's awesome. Ryan and I love Brent. He's a good addition.
So I want to do 2.0 here and kind of figure out what's going on. And I can share with you where I'm at right now. I touched on it a little bit with Aaron. The other thing I wanted to get into as well was to talk to you about all the marijuana you guys are into lately. Oh, wait.
The kids call it dope, Brian.
Oh,
well,
no.
we'll clarify that as well. Because if you knew Ryan and I, we are so not into marijuana, but we are totally into hemp and CBD.
So
yes.
That was a fascinating podcast. Did you guys get, because you did one, so for those that aren't in the know, Hunt Harvest Health put out a podcast on cannabis, and it's a fairly vilified plant in some circles.
I titled that the most vilified plant in the world because it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things about it that I didn't know.
I interviewed Matt Kleeman, he is the antithesis of somebody really trying to change the world in a grassroots way. He is a previous ski bum, ex-botany major who started grassroots learning about plants. He grew up in this botany world, and then he was introduced to cannabis and the healing medicinal effects of it for cancer. Mm-hmm. And he started seeing benefits in his own life with family members using cannabis in all different forms, whether it's CBD with THC. And, the podcast goes, I can't even really do justice to this. You really should go listen to that podcast because he is an expert at it. And I met him because we at our clinic, we refer for, sometimes we feel people maybe need to get a green card or they need some CBD, and he's an expert at that. So we can send them to him, and he does free consults. Like if you walked in and you said, okay, Dr. Hillary sent me here and I have pain. She said you could help me with CBD. And he would sit down with you. How are you feeling? And he would say, okay, I think you need to take 120 milligrams a day for a month. And then He does this for free. And he grows his own plants, harvests his own medicine, makes his own CBD products, as well as CBD with THC, if you have a green card in Montana anyways. And he is dedicated. He's like, I want to change the face of medicine with this plant. And he's not using it like pot. He's not smoking joints all day. We didn't even talk about that in the podcast, but we talked about the differences and what THC can do for you, what CBD can do for you.
And what have you noticed in your own life?
Yeah. So I started doing CBD about 2 years ago because I have a lot of joint pain, and I tend to be an anxious person. Yeah. Because I'm highly driven, and I tend to overdrive myself, and I can get anxiety. And sleep was another big issue. But I started taking it for joint pain in my hands, and I started just slowly knowing that my joint pain was getting better. And not only that, I just felt calmer in my mind. I felt like I could cope better with stress and so I just started kind of taking it religiously. And I lived in Washington at the time. So Washington, marijuana is legal, and I can walk into anywhere and buy CBD. But I bought a very specific CBD from a guy on Vashon Island, a girlfriend referred, and I bought his tinctures, and I just took a little bit every day. And that's how I started into it. And then as working with patients, you deal with a lot of pain. Pain and inflammation are like in the top 3 probably of major conditions people come in with. And so if you're always throwing, you're always saying, well, we need to give you anti-inflammatories. We need to get your inflammation down. We need to work on your diet, which obviously is the foundation of improving inflammation. Or you're dealing with patients coming in because they've had long-standing pain and they're like on really hardcore drugs that now they're addicts, and you're dealing with now they've built tolerance and you can't give them any more opioid, or they can't take NSAIDs and opioids because they've trashed their stomach. And it's like pain is a huge problem. So I started realizing, the CBD in Washington, it was like I could recommend that people start using CBD. And I started selling tinctures from a distributor out of Colorado. I started selling his stuff in my clinic for headaches or whatever. And I mean, people were like, okay, I can't run out of that stuff. Like they just notice. And I thought, if you think about what an NSAID does, like Advil, people think like when you take an Advil and your pain goes away, like Advil actually helped you. Well, Advil didn't really help you. All Advil did was block an enzyme in the inflammation process that stops
Doesn't it
the
just
pain.
postpone it in a way?
Yeah, it's just blocking, in the inflammatory cascade. It's blocking an enzyme and a few other things. Like you've probably heard of COX-2 inhibitors. They've taken some of those off the market in the past because they were like, yeah, your inflammation went down, but you had a bunch of other really horrible side effects.
Yeah.
But those are like enzymes, like COX-2 is an enzyme. And so it's just blocking that enzyme. And what I've learned, and I learned a lot of this from, my own research about CBD and cannabis and stuff. And then when I talked with Matt, it's like what we're coming to see is that because we have this endocannabinoid system within our body, we have CB1 and CB2 receptors. One has an affinity for the nervous system, central nervous system, and one has an affinity for the immune system and the gut and all this. Is like CBD is nutrition. It's like food.
Yeah.
So how it helps inflammation is it actually balances out these systems within the body instead of just taking an Advil where you just block an enzyme and then tomorrow the enzyme's going to be working again. You need to take it again to block the enzyme. And then over time you start having ulcers in your stomach and then you can't take it anymore. And then you still, or you have to take more and more and more. CBD is actually different where you can high dose, and I'll have people go in there with gut pain, chronic pain, a lot of gut stuff, Crohn's disease, gastritis, ulcerative colitis. I see things there's really no diagnosis for sometimes, and you high dose on that for a while, like a month.
Yep.
It's like you eat, like you're getting the nutrition to your system, and you start upregulating receptors, and then you can actually down your dosage as you get more
CBD
as you
over
get
time.
Like nourished, you don't need as much.
Yeah.
Which is different than like an opioid or Advil.
Yeah.
You have to keep upping your dose because those receptors are coming up and saying, I need more. And now you have all these receptors and they need stuff to be fit in, where CBD is like a food.
Yeah.
And the endocannabinoid system was literally just discovered in the last decade. I mean, this is a very new thing. And what Matt talks about in the podcast is that we have lived harmoniously with this plant, cannabis, for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Now, there's different types of cannabis. And when we talk about CBD, almost all the CBD that is being sold, like what Matt makes, he grows a strain of cannabis sativa, which is hemp, and he gets CBD from that. And the CBD that he sells, like he can sell to anybody without a green card, has absolutely no THC in it because his strain is that it produces no THC.
Right.
If you want to get high, or medicinally you need THC for like chemotherapy, nausea and vomiting, THC is very effective at decreasing nausea and vomiting with that because it goes in and attaches to those CB receptor, the receptors in the gut and the immune system, and dampens the effect of the chemotherapy, like the nausea. Sometimes you need a little THC to make the CBD, but there's over 100 cannabidiols in cannabis. And so we just talk about CBD, we just talk about THC. There's hundreds of these in a cannabis plant. Right. But most of it is coming. So if you're doing cannabis to get high, then you're taking a strain that's high in THC, because THC is the psychoactive compound.
Right.
CBD has no psychoactivity at all. And you can take a CBD product with THC in it. THC has actually been shown to make it a little bit more effective, but you can't legally sell anything that has over 0.3% THC. And some laws with the states now, like even a little bit of THC is whatever. So when we put this podcast out, I was really just learning. I wanted to learn more from somebody who actually, he lives with this plant, he grows this plant, he harvests it, he turns it into medicine, and then he gives it to people who, they're not coming in saying, I want to get high. They're coming into him saying, I have a diagnosis of death. I don't want to deal with that every day. I want to have my days where I can actually realize that I'm not, he said it's like, it can help palliate you. Like you smoke a little pot or you take a little THC. It helps you feel better about the fact that you're dying. Right. Or I have pain. I have anxiety. I can give you some CBD and you can start, having less anxiety in your day and less pain. So I think that we have a huge misconception because, of course, anything can be abused. Anything.
Right.
You can abuse so many of the drugs that we call out there, pharmaceutical prescribed drugs. If your doctor gives it to you, it's okay. Those drugs are killing people.
The opioid epidemic that's going on right now,
yes.
which we don't talk about hardly at all, but it's everywhere.
Well, we don't talk about it because it's almost an insurmountable thing that we can't overcome at this point. Meaning that there are so many millions of people addicted to opioids that the cost of helping and actually the cost that it would take to take all those people and actually change their lives back and get them off those opioids would not only bankrupt the pharmaceutical system, because that's a lot of money that people pay into the pharmaceutical system, is that it would bankrupt the healthcare system because you can't afford treatment and the things that need to be done for all these opioid addicts. And this is why, unfortunately, when you start giving people opioids, if you as a doctor and as them, they are not monitoring their intake well, and you're not supporting them with all the other factors in their life, if you're not managing their pain in another way, if you're not dealing with their diet and lifestyle, if you're not dealing with their emotional issues that they have in their life, a lot of people have like emotional issues that are causing them pain.
Right.
If you don't deal with these things and you just keep giving them medications, then they're going to need more and more and more. And then you know what happens? Unfortunately, you get cut off. Because now they say, you got too much opioids. We can't give you anymore because now you're a drug seeker, you're an addict. And what happens, then heroin use goes up. These illegal drugs go up. And that's because they're cheap and people need the opioid. And what I love about Matt is he talks about how cannabis, CBD, a small amount of THC can actually get people off of opioids. If you use it correctly, you can increase the levels of that, decrease the levels of opioids, and you can. And he makes a comment. He says, I never have an opioid addict come into my office and say, hey, I want to stay on these opioids forever. They feel great. He says, people come in and they say, I got to get off this stuff. I got to get off of this. Help me out. I don't know what to do.
They know they're addicts. They want off. They don't know how to. There's a physical connection.
And then there's a point with addiction, unfortunately. We've all been affected by people in our lives that are the classic drug addicts. Mm-hmm. They will lie, cheat, and steal. They will sell their body parts. They will sell their first child. Literally, these things happen. People do this horrible stuff for drugs. And it's because they have destroyed their brain. The drugs have destroyed their moral, ethical parts of their brain that make them realize what they're doing is actually hurting not just themselves but other people, and their reptilian brain takes over. They need the drug, they need the dopamine hit, they have to get it, and they'll do anything to get it. And when you are handing opioids out to people and not realizing that you can take a very smart, functional, happy, wonderful, like let's say father who's in some pain, who had a car accident, he needs help, you put him on opioids, he starts taking them and he starts feeling better. But then if he doesn't take him, he doesn't, so he has to take more. And you go down and you hear these stories all the time. He ends up on the street, he loses everything, his wife leaves him, he's in treatment, in and out of treatment, in and out of treatment. And it's like here we are vilifying something like cannabis or CBD when we could be using this plant to actually help these people get off of these substances before they have brain damage, before they are totally incapacitated and lost their entire life. And unfortunately, I hate to say that, but the pharmaceutical situation started that.
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean, whenever I go to a doctor, 90% of the time, they're not in good physical shape. They're not healthy people, the doctors I've seen. And they're not, their solution is a statin or some kind of prescription drug to sort of just fix me. And
well, this is another piece, though, that's difficult as a clinician. People come in and they want to fix. So the benefit that I have is I'm a naturopath. So you come into me, I'm going to spend an hour and a half with you the first visit. And you could sit there and tell me everything you want to tell me. We talk about what's going on. We do some physical exam. And I then take a historical look of you and what you're doing and what you're not doing. And then I try to start helping you and guiding you. And what do you want to do? What are you willing to do?
Yep.
The average medical doctor has 10 to 15 minutes with the patient. He has to do so many billable procedures to fulfill his contractual obligation to either the hospital or the polyclinic. Prescribing nutrition is not a billable procedure. Therefore, I need to give you a statin. I need to do something on you, a physical exam, and then I need to send you on your way because I got 40 other people I have to see that day. Okay? The system is not set up for doctors. It's not set up for patients. I've always said this on my podcast. Nobody goes into medicine because they hate people.
Right.
Okay? You almost kill yourself. You almost lose your marriage. You become unhealthy so that someday you can help people. Mm-hmm. That's what happens when you get trained to be a physician. For me, I feel fortunate that I chose an avenue that I can sit there and I can have this conversation. And I'm telling you what, I had this woman come into me. She told me that I got her chart from her previous provider. I was like, oh no, thyroid problem, you name it. She couldn't lose weight. They did an endoscopy on her, colonoscopy. She had all these GI problems. I'd never seen her. I got all prepared for her. She came in. She looked fine to me. She looked thin and healthy. And she sat down and she said, well, you've probably read my chart, right? And I'm like, yeah. So what are we going to work on? Where do we want to start here? And she said, I just want to let you know that I really don't have any of those problems anymore. A year ago, I left my narcissistic husband. And since then, I've just increasingly got better and all my health problems have gone away. I'm not even kidding you. And I was like, wow, really? Tell me about that. And she spent the whole hour and a half telling me about her process and what she's had to do and how she realized that she was in a toxic relationship, okay?
Right.
So I didn't, and then now we're working on getting her healthier. We're working on her hormones. We're working on her adrenals. We're working on her sleep because she still has physical issues related to that. She made a huge change in her emotional state and how it was affecting her biochemistry. So to me, I think that, there's so many factors that play into healthcare, but the medical system is not set up to dive into these things with people and really get to the root.
Especially when it's stress related like that, abusive relationship. You're not.
There's a lot of elephants in the rooms when it comes to abusive relationships, and us providers are just as guilty as anyone else. A woman or a man comes in and they talk about their spouse or their situation. Obviously, there's always two sides to a story, and as a clinician, you always have to take that into account because I've worked with couples apart and they both have a totally different story. And so you need to, it's not my job to fix per se their relationship, but relationship is ginormous in our lives. It's everything. Yeah. Like here you and me are talking. Without our relationship, we wouldn't be sitting here talking. And if you're in a marriage that's just killing you, literally, there's people that are dying because the marriages they're in. Or you had an abusive father you never dealt with. Or you had like a mother who was controlling and like I've seen people, their mothers like made them sick as kids so they could get attention.
Yeah.
You know, it's called Munchausen by proxy. They make their kids sick, literally, so they can go to the doctor all the time. And there's people out there that the will of a person is huge, because I cannot tell you how many stories I've heard where I'm like, how is it that you're sitting here in front of me?
Yeah.
Like a functional person in society.
Yeah.
And you got some health problems, like, I don't doubt it. How is it that you're sitting here? I mean, the things you hear that people survive in their life makes you like, whoo, you know, cross everything that you had it.
Right.
You had this.
It makes you grateful
that
for
you are who you are. And so what I'm saying is that I think that if we go back to cannabis, is that we have vilified this plant because the government wanted that to happen. The Hemp Farming Act, hemp was outlawed because the timber industry, the oil industry, all of these industries needed money, and hemp is such a versatile plant. It can do food, it can do oil, it can do clothing, it can make, I saw a car online made out of hemp. You know, you don't need metal. So I think that we need to go back, and what we're learning now is that our bodies actually can be better with this product. And CBD, I'm all about health and getting things better. I'm definitely not about getting people stoned all day. So unfortunately, I think people want to think Ryan and I, because he has long hair and I'm a naturopath, that we sit home and we smoke pot all day. But if you knew us, that's like furthest from the truth. And I had a lot of my own misconceptions, because I grew up, like I've told you, my stepdad was Native American, and he was a recovering addict. And so in my household, drugs and alcohol were bad.
Yeah.
And I was raised around that things like this are bad.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, just like hunting, I've had to open my eyes to the community and meeting people. Same thing with cannabis. I've had to open my eyes that there's healing potential in this.
You know, when you're dealing with prescription drugs, people don't have the same, they don't vilify it like they do cannabis, right?
Well, prescription drugs, though, if we talk about testosterone is a controlled substance and a prescription drug.
I mean, in
so
terms
not
of
all drugs are bad.
Painkillers.
Yes.
There tends to be a green light. You're okay. If it's a prescription for you, you're good. You're safe. It's all regulated. It's all okay. Yeah. But man, if you do that CBD stuff, there you are, like being a rebel, a pothead, a toker.
Which I don't understand.
You know what I mean?
No one regulates Snickers bars, and they're just as bad.
Yeah, they're worse.
But but what I mean is, I think there is a conception in people's minds, largely driven by what's socially acceptable. And
yes, and we have all been trained that these things are bad. We have actually been trained that opioids are bad too. So nobody really wants to go on opioids. Mm-hmm. But let's say you have an accident, you break your leg, you're in the hospital. I mean, I shattered my elbow mountain biking when I was 19. I woke up from that surgery. That was a painful surgery, and I had a morphine pump. Thank God. Like, what would I have done without that? I think about, like, you watch these movies about the Civil War and stuff. These guys are getting their legs chopped off with like no morphine,
no anesthetic,
nothing. So we do have antibiotics now. We do have these opioids that we can decrease pain when you really need to. We can make people comfortable. It's just that it has to be used responsibly, and this is the same thing with cannabis. It needs to be used responsibly. We are such a animal of excess. We think more is better.
Yeah.
Right? So we think if I take a little opioid, a little bit more won't hurt me. If I smoke a little weed, a little more weed won't hurt me. And biochemically, our bodies they listen to us. So they start upregulating things so we can take more.
Yeah.
But then when we decide, I want to stop this, our body's like, yo, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like you can't. But the cool thing about like CBD or even marijuana, honestly, you can like if you're smoking pot within a month, you can be, if you were serious about it, you can regulate your THC receptors and you're not addicted.
Quick.
It's very different.
Yeah.
And CBD, there's no addiction. It's not like that. So